Thank you, Senator. I want to shift gears for a minute and talk about foreign affairs, and in particular, the role of U.S. foreign policy when it comes to upholding human rights and women's rights internationally. So I'm wondering what you think that role should be, and whether you believe that in situations like Boko Haram in Nigeria kidnapping schoolgirls, or the Taliban's repression of women in Afghanistan, or honor killings, mass rapes, female feticide, female genital mutilation, child marriage in various parts of the world, should they ever warrant direct U.S. intervention? And I'm talking about any kind of intervention: military intervention, withholding of foreign aid, diplomatic pressure. And how would you balance the line between necessary global pressure and heavy-handed intervention on behalf of populations in sovereign states that don't have a voice?
That's a light question.
That is an excellent question. It's a difficult question, and it can't be answered simply. I think what makes our country great is that we have had a history for so many years, a far from perfect history to be sure, but a history which has stood up and fought for human dignity. Now, we have failed in many ways, but we have also been a beacon of hope for people all over the world. And as president, I once again will shine that torch as high as I can to say that the United States of America believes in human dignity, and we believe in social justice, and we believe in equal rights, and we will end and help countries all over the world end all forms of bigotry and prejudice. That's what I want the United States to be seen as, the country all over the world. Now, I will also say, and broaden your question a little bit, that we talk about foreign affairs in a very dangerous and ugly world. You should all know that you're looking at a former congressman who heard what George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and others said about the need to invade Iraq. I listened to them, and I believed that they were not telling the truth. I voted against the war in Iraq. And to answer your question about military interventionism and regime change, what I believe is we have got to learn the very painful lesson of the war in Iraq. And what that lesson is to me is that the United States of America cannot and should not do it alone. We cannot do it alone. And what that means, not only on the issues that you have raised, but broader issues, that we have got to work in coalition, broad coalition. Cannot be just America. Cannot be just our young men and women engaged in perpetual warfare in the Middle East, as some of our Republican colleagues want. So when you're looking at a horrific, unimaginable organization like ISIS, whose barbarism includes sexual slavery. I don't think they think of women as second-class citizens, probably as 10th-class citizens, all right? And when we think about a group like ISIS, what we understand is, at least that I understand, is that ISIS must be crushed and destroyed, but it must be done by coalition. And what do I mean by that? I mean the United States must work with other major powers, UK, France, Germany, including Russia. And what we must also do is understand what King Abdullah of Jordan has recently said. And he said that, yes, terrorism is an international issue, but it is primarily a Muslim issue because ISIS and other groups have hijacked Islam and have converted it into something which it is absolutely not. And the fundamental responsibility for defeating ISIS, according to King Abdullah of Jordan, is Muslim troops on the ground supported by the major powers. And that is what I believe. So to answer your question, we have got to do everything that we can to end bigotry, discrimination against women, against gays, against other minorities. But I will also, at the same time, do everything that I can to see that the United States does not get involved in never-ending warfare in the Middle East.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Senator Sanders, we're going to bring the issues back to domestic issues, and particularly an issue facing not only this next questioner in the South, but around the country. So next we'll hear from Keisha Saffold from Alabama.
Hi, my name is Keisha Saffold, and I think I have the best job in the world. I think we have the most important job on the face of this earth and probably the least respected job. And I own 2 child care centers in Dothan, Alabama. My centers are not traditional centers in that they're open 6 days a week and they're open till midnight. And this is based off of my good and bad experience as a single parent. In my former lifetime, I was a news producer, and I worked every shift, first, second, and third. And I just found from my experiences, the places that were usually open the hours I needed were in bad neighborhoods, and I just felt like I had to sacrifice quality. And I didn't understand why my daughter deserved less than because her mom had to work after 6 o'clock. And so for me, because I couldn't afford quality care, it was never about finding a good child care center. It was about choosing the lesser of the evils. So one night, I got off work with my then 2-year-old by my side, and we were mugged. And it was horrific. I walked away from TV news altogether. That's what I went to school for. That's what my degree is in. And I came back to Alabama to work in my mother's daycare center, and I went to work on my master's. And we started this child care center. Today, we're the largest privately owned child care center in our area. So I understand as a parent how difficult it is to be able to afford quality child care. I understand as a preschool teacher how incredibly low our wages are and how terrible the benefits, if you're even lucky to get benefits, are. And as a child care provider, I understand how difficult it is to provide high quality care and pay your workers real wages. My question to you, Senator Sanders, is how can we change child care in America in a way that'll be beneficial to the teachers, to the parents, and to the child care providers?
First of all, I got to give this lady a hug. You've touched the subject. Now, I know we got to get out of here within an hour, right? But she really gets me going here. I could go on for about 5 hours on this.
And I hope Jane's not upset that you're kissing other folks on the stage, Senator.
Keisha, first of all, thank you so much for the extraordinary work that you are doing, all right? When I talk about a political revolution, when I talk about thinking big, when I talk about radically transforming our priorities in this country, what you said is exactly what I mean. When I was mayor of the city of Burlington, when I was elected, you know what the very first meeting that I held, which is when I ended up meeting my wife, Jane, by the way, because she was interested in children's issues as well. We talked about children. Okay? And out of that came, to make a long story short, what was, I think then and probably now, one of the largest child care centers in the city of Burlington, after-school programs for our kids, a community, a teen center for kids to play their loud and terrible music. But it was a very successful effort. A Little League program in the low-income area of our state, a kids' newspaper, et cetera, et cetera. But let me talk about what Keisha was saying and talk about how crazy the priorities are in this country. Every psychologist who studies the issue understands the most important years of a human being's life in terms of emotional and intellectual development are 0 to 4. That's a fact. So think for a moment what we do in this country. As Keisha just said, all over this country, including my own state, it is very, very hard for working families to find high-quality, affordable child care or pre-K. What you find is that, and Keisha touched on this as well, you find that many of the people hired in child care are making, what, $9, $10 an hour? Not even that. They're making less than McDonald's workers, and we are entrusting them with our children in the most important years of their life. You can make the case, I will make the case, that people who work with 3-year-olds are doing more important work than college professors do. Now that I've lost the college professor vote, all right. So what do? What we do is understand we're not living in the 1950s when dad went to work and mom stayed home with the kids. Right now, I don't know the exact number, but something like 85% of moms are not staying home with their kids. They can't afford to. They are out working. So what our job is to understand that when we talk about education in America, you're not talking about first grade through high school. You're talking about 0 through university level. Ultimately, Keisha, and I'm not promising you we could do this in the first year, but ultimately what we should do is expand public education. Now, right now, I have a proposal to make public colleges and universities tuition-free. But on the other end, equally important, is to create a day, and it won't happen tomorrow. It's an expensive proposition, but it must happen, and the goal must be to make sure that every working parent with kids in this country has access to publicly funded, high-quality child care. You know, everything gets tied together. You know, as we all know, one issue is related to another issue, related to another issue. If we have real unemployment in this country of almost 10%, if we have kids who are hanging out on street corners, what about creating many hundreds of thousands of jobs by training our young people to work effectively in child care centers all over this country? So, Keisha, thanks again for what you're doing. It is one of the major issues that, by the way, we never talk about, very rarely talk about. Thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we're going to hear from Ross Gruters, one of Iowa's own.
My name is Ross Gruters, and I've worked as... Try this for the third time. My name is Ross Gruters. I've worked as a union locomotive engineer for over a decade now. And we all know that unions have been at the front of the fight for better wages and working conditions. Similarly, environmentalists have been at the front of the fight to protect the health and safety of our communities and our planet. Unfortunately, opponents of both labor and environmentalists work to pit the two against each other. As a union member and an environmentalist, I've worked with Iowa CCI Action and Railroad Workers United, a rank-and-file caucus of railroad workers, to do both, to put the health and safety of our communities and our working economic conditions together and first. So nationally, what that's looked like is organizing across the country with other environmentalists, labor and railroad safety and environmental conferences along with my fellow environmentalists. Here in the state of Iowa, what that's looked like is protecting our land, water, and resources so that we can oppose harmful big oil land grabs like the Bakken pipeline across our state. As you know, Senator Sanders, there are movements all over the world to transition away from fossil fuel dependence. As president, what will you do to support the people working to protect the future of our planet while still ensuring quality economic opportunity for working people?
Ross, thank you. And Ross, you're absolutely right that there are reactionaries who want to pit those of us who are environmentalists against those of us who are pro-labor and understand the need for decent-paying jobs. But you know and I know there really is not a contradiction. So two things. We have introduced what I am quite confident is the most comprehensive climate change legislation in the history of the United States Senate. And what that does is not only impose a tax on carbon to provide major disincentives for the production of greenhouse gases, but what we also do is put a huge amount of money into helping people who in one way or another are impacted by the transformation of our energy system. So we have got to protect those workers who may lose their jobs. Now, in terms of rail, though, what I will tell you, if we create a state-of-the-art rail system, we will create a whole lot of jobs, and by the way, significantly cut back on carbon emissions. So bottom line is, I believe if we are sensitive and sensible, we can transform our energy system, we can create millions of decent-paying jobs in the process, and we can protect those workers who are impacted by the transformation. That's my goal.
Great. Thank you. Senator, well, our next questioner is Enrique Aguilar from Greater Minnesota.
Hello, I'm Enrique Aguilar. I'm from the Greater Minnesota area, and I'm a U.S. citizen being punished physically, spiritually, emotionally, and psychologically by the broken immigration system as it is today. My husband works over 50 hours a week to provide for my family, and I'm home caring for our 2-year-old son, with the suffocating fear that at any moment my husband can be deported. I still remember that something as simple as dropping him off at daycare was catastrophic for our family. I got the phone call that my husband had been pulled over, taking our son to daycare. He was in the back seat, and I was too far with the only Minnesota driver's license to save my family. I can remember overhearing the police officer say, "I'm going to take you in, and I'm going to place your son in child protection services," as if that was a solution to the problem. That was a direct threat of my family's stability. And I'm tired of living under the fear that I will be pushed into being a single mother, that my son will be forced to live without his father, and that my husband has to fight tooth and nail to be a father to our son. And I want to know, Bernie Sanders, what are you going to do to alleviate this very real fear that is hanging over undocumented families and the citizens that love them?
Thank you very much for your willingness to share with us what is a very personal experience. Let me answer it this way. For a start, I work closely with President Obama and agree with him on many issues. I do not agree with him on his policy toward deportation. Number two, as soon as I possibly can, we will provide legal protection for 11 million undocumented people in this country. I will do my best to get Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform, but if they don't do their job, I will use all of the powers that the president has to protect undocumented people. And thirdly, as President of the United States, I will do everything I can to stand up to the Donald Trumps of the world and their bigotry and their xenophobia and their desire to turn one American against another person. The Trumps of the world and the other demagogues like this understand that the rich get richer and everyone else gets poorer when you divide people up. So you have a Trump who for years was insulting the African American community by telling us that the President of the United States was an illegitimate president, not born in America. All right? And then you have, and by the way, stirring the fires of racism in the process, right? Think about it. President of the United States won, pretty strong vote, re-elected, pretty strong vote, and you got Trump and others going around, oh, he's not a legitimate president. You know, it's a funny thing about that. My dad was born in Poland. I'm the son of an immigrant. Okay, I'm the son of an immigrant. Nobody has ever asked me for my birth certificate. Maybe it has something to do with the color of my skin as opposed to Obama's skin. So you got the Trumps of the world trying to divide this country up on racial lines by suggesting our president is not legitimate. And then he comes up with the brilliant idea that all the people coming over from Mexico are criminals and racists and rapists and drug dealers. So we're supposed to hate Mexicans. And then his next brilliant idea is we got to prevent Muslims from coming into this country, and we're supposed to hate Muslims. That type of demagoguery has gone on. He didn't invent it. It's gone on for hundreds of years. It's called scapegoating minorities, and we're supposed to hate people because they're a little bit different than we are. Our job is to stand together, to be united, not divided. And with our unity to, in fact, take on the people who are really wrecking the middle class today, and that is not Latinos who are picking tomatoes at $8 an hour. I can tell you that.
Thank you, Bernie. So next up, we're going to hear from George Zornick from The Nation magazine.
Senator, thank you. I'd actually like to follow up on that issue. As you know, around Christmas time, the Obama administration stepped up deportation raids for families that came from Central America, particularly child migrants. You wrote to the White House and asked for temporary protective status for these migrants. I'm curious if you were to become president, what your criteria would be for granting that status, because theoretically over 4 or 8 years there would be unforeseen crises, other groups asking for that protection. So how do you evaluate their claims, and who would you grant it to?
Good question. And this is what I think. Once again, what this country has historically been about is a beacon of hope. You know, it sounds rhetorical, it sounds overly dramatic, but that's true. All over the world, people look to the United States, Statue of Liberty. They fled oppression. came to a country of freedom and democracy. Now, what you're talking about is the fact that people have fled Guatemala, Honduras, other countries, where communities are literally being run by the drug cartels. What we know is that some people who have been forced to go back have been killed. So if you're asking me what my status is, what a refugee status is in general, it says that when somebody is forced to flee their country because they and their families are unsafe back home, they could be killed, they could be illegally imprisoned. That to me is what refugee status is about, and I think we have the moral responsibility to protect those people, and that's what I would do.
Thank you, Senator.